And now, Biella Coleman is going to tell us why everything we know about Anonymous is wrong.
Okay.
Really.
If I find it.
In like 2 seconds.
Okay, so just open this up. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. There you go. I've spent the last 3 years or so online studying Anonymous from a kind of anthropological perspective. And I was going to do a talk that focused a little bit more on the lol of the ticks, Lolitics, but actually in the last few weeks I've become increasingly frustrated by some of the representations that are sedimenting around Anonymous. So my talk is a little bit more serious, ranty, and polemical. So sorry about that, but the last two had a lot of the lol. So I'm just going to kind of jump in. All right. So what is Anonymous? I think we hear, in terms of the political significance, 2 major tropes, which I'm going to complicate later. The first one, I'm going to quote Evgeny Morozov, an internet critic who wrote recently, capturing an idea that exists more broadly. He says, hacktivists keep supplying the industry with strong examples as to why more public money should be spent beefing up internet security and surveillance while eliminating online anonymity. So Anonymous becomes an excuse for governments to express their sort of repressive impulses. So to others, Anonymous represents the best that the internet has to politically offer. And here I'm going to quote now Yochai Benkler, who provides a contrasting view. He says, Anonymous demonstrates one of the new core aspects of power in a networked democratic society. Individuals are vastly more effective and less susceptible to manipulation, control, and suppression by traditional sources of power than they were even a decade ago. Okay, so both perspectives I think are quite valid, but incomplete. And also in the process, they, as virtually everyone else, I think perpetuate some key stereotypes, which I'm going to now address. All right, so the first one. Anonymous exists in the internet ether. So virtually every piece on Anonymous, and I would actually put myself in the same boat. I've done this many, many times. Everyone kind of opens by portraying Anonymous as fundamentally inaccessible, inchoate, and spectral. So here's a few quotes. This movement is so distributed, fluid, and occasionally disorganized that anyone seeking to pigeonhole it into a coherent ideological doctrine would not get too far. That was, again, Evgeny. Here's another quote. It is an idea, a zeitgeist coupled with a set of social and technical practices, diffuse and leaderless. Its driving force is lulls, irreverence, playfulness, and spectacle. Again, you know, they capture a really important reality in the sense that Anonymous isn't a singularity. There's multiple nodes or network. No one can own the name. Anyone can take it. They resist institutionalization and even defining their norms, although one network by the name of Vox has started to define it in a constitution. But really, frankly, it goes too far. These people are in very, very stable internet relay chat channels. These are the 3 kind of most popular ones currently, AnonOps, AnonNet, and VoxAnon. If they're not being DDoSed, they're up. And then the participants on these channels are there extremely, extremely regularly. So that over time, you can get to know them, of course, not necessarily their real identities because they're not making these knowns for obvious reasons, but they are pseudo-anonymous, not anonymous, so their personalities come to life, you know who does what, and so on and so forth. And I think another really important element is that often these networks lay claim to operations, and then it's also the case that different networks have their own kind of institutional cultures and tactics. So for example, AnonNet doesn't use DDoSing, whereas AnonOps, that's what they were kind of famous for. So obviously, you know, one of the big problems about identifying them as completely inchoate and spectral is that we kind of feed the hysteria that gets surrounded around Anonymous, and that's precisely what law enforcement and security officials want. So I think we could just go a little bit too far. All right, relatedly, there's an idea that they can unleash unfathomable evil. And here I'm going to read another quote from someone called Josh Corman, who has written really insightful stuff about Anonymous. He says, "They're chaotic good like Robin Hood, and there's chaotic evil as well. There's some people that just want to see the world burn." And he's sort of claiming that this is the case with Anonymous. There's good actors and there's evil actors. And here I'm bracketing trolling that has come out of 4chan. I'm just talking here about the political wings, as is he. So there's been a handful of incidents that have been uncharacteristically anon. For example, there was a British hacker who hacked into or sought to hack into the largest abortion clinic in Britain because he was against abortion. So this happened, but he was kind of acting on his own. But in the astonishing kind of blizzard of anonymous operations of the last year and a half, there has never been one large-scale, diabolical, evil operation that has ever been unleashed by Anonymous, nor even a kind of statement of intent to do so. And so I think it's really important to note that. Now, that doesn't mean they haven't done stupid shit or you have to agree with what they've done, that there have maybe been ineffective or counterproductive, right? There's all these kind of elements to different operations. I'm just sort of saying that it's not the case that, you know, they have been able to do something that has caused lives to be lost or extreme damage. And even their kind of DDoS operations always have hit static web pages, kind of business card style web pages. They've never been able to take down an Amazon. They've never been able to take down a website where there's a lot of financial transactions and would cause a huge financial loss to the organization, because those websites really have a lot of resources and are very, very, very tough to take down. Now, over the last 3 years of political operations, the closest we've seen to a false flag operation was with Antisec, which was a small hacker crew who did a lot of the kind of very controversial hacking and controversial within Anonymous itself. One of its most outspoken ex-members, Sabu, turns out was an FBI informant. But even having an FBI informant at the heart of Antisec, there's no compelling evidence yet, there might be, but yet, that he seems to have steered people into kind of risky, dubious waters. For example, another hacker who was arrested, Jeremy Hammond, had a long history of doing kind of very risky political interventions. And probably the best quote I saw about this was on IRC, again, the stable place where they are, by someone by the name of Barrett Brown, the most unanonymous anonymous, who put it in these terms. Jeremy Hammond was pretty hardcore, even if he was kind of wrong about a lot of shit. Holocaust denier comes to town to give a lecture, so go there and throw chairs. Here comes a cop, better throw a bottle of Gatorade at him. Uh-oh, it's a flag representing Chicago's 2016 Olympic bid, burn it up. And it's true, like this guy was on IRC, he was actually one of the hackers that was invisible for a long time, which was very unusual, and then he popped up on some channels. And this was, like, he had very revolutionary rhetoric, right? So it's not even clear that Sabu steered an individual like this into kind of more risque territory. Okay, let me skip the next slide, and I want to get to this one. They provide ammunition to those wanting to strengthen the surveillance state. So it's definitely the case that government officials and law enforcement are painting Anonymous as one of Menken's imaginary goblins poised to menace the public. And this is one of my favorite quotes from a really long time ago, so I'm just going to share it. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. So it's no doubt that this is absolutely happening with Anonymous, with certain sectors. But I think in order for us to really glean what's going on and to understand the political significance of this, it's worth noting that national governments around the world have not only aspired to control the internet and have been developing statutes to erode kind of personal rights and privacies, they've done so successfully long before the existence of Anonymous. And Anonymous is more a sort of reaction than a cause of it. And we have to kind of acknowledge the very, very depressing fact that if Anonymous were to disappear, the surveillance state is so kind of well entrenched, so within our midst, that really not much would change in that regard. So they could definitely grease the wheels a little bit, but if they vanish, I hardly think anything will change. So now I'm going to just finish with one last point, which is the political impact is insignificant because they dish out pure spectacle. Now, obviously, when it comes to different operations, what they do is not just pure spectacle. Sometimes they provide technology assistance. They've worked with activists on the ground. So they do many different things. But at a kind of meta level, yes, Anonymous is good at spectacle. It's good at spectacle because of the DDoSing, because of the lulls, because they do stupid shit. All these sort of things contribute to spectacle, which garners media attention. Now, many people have kind of claimed spectacle is ineffective, and it's definitely the case that on its own it's ineffective, but I would say that it can be very valuable tool in a kind of diverse political kit. And if I had to sort of choose between the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Anonymous as the entity that was going to fight for my digital rights, I would most likely pick the EFF. But I don't have to ever make that choice, right? It's never an either-or scenario. It's not a zero-sum game, so that we can have, and in fact, I would say that we desperately, desperately need all these different elements acting in concert together. So Anonymous is really good in certain instances to dramatize some of the issues, the very specific issues and more general issues, which I'm going to get to. We need investigative journalists who put the pieces of a puzzle together. We need advocacy groups, and we need internet service providers who are unwilling to hand over your personal data to the government. So now I just want to finish with one last point, which is, with Anonymous, it's not simply that their DDoS tactics dramatize specific issues, such as with their campaign against the anti-counterfeiting trade agreement. It's that in their totality, both symbolically as well as what they've done in terms of some of their hacks, it relays an urgent message about anonymity to complicate. Given the contemporary reality of a corporate and state-controlled surveillance apparatus, Anonymous stands out. It compels enchants for a very particular reason. It has provided a small but potent oasis of anonymity in the current expansive desert of surveillance, much like the one literally being built in Utah right now by the NSA. In an era where most of our personal data is archived online, in a time where states and corporations collect, market, and monetize this data and our preferences, our likes and our dislikes, there is indeed something hopeful, one might say even necessary, in Anonymous's effacement of the self, in the cloaking of their identities, in striking at legislation seen to threaten privacy, and seeking to expose the depth and the extent of a privatized government surveillance state. And I do think the more immediate danger in portraying Anonymous as a diabolical, nebulous hydra is that these arguments will serve not to simply really fortify the surveillance state, because that's already here, but it will fortify legal statutes that will criminalize this sort of dissent. And this is precisely what's happening in Europe right now with DDoSing. We could, instead of doing this, instead of painting them as a kind of diabolical, nebulous entity that exists in the ether, we could instead face the current depressing realities of the state of surveillance and the surveillance state, and inspire individuals to join the fight against efforts to undermine individual freedoms, which will require a concerted effort by all citizens to secure in every possible way to change our future, because the present is already here. So that's it, and thank you.